How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to Quickflicks, the first of two double feature episodes this week. And I hope you guys had a very safe and at least enjoyable happy holiday season. Nothing much else to say there. But today, in this episode, we'll be talking about Wonder Woman 1984 and the new Robert Rodriguez film, We Can Be Heroes. So let's start off with the big main event for the weekend, and that was Wonder Woman 1984. Wonder Woman 1984 is once again directed by Patty Jenkins and stars Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. It's set in 1984, when one day a mysterious MacGuffin appears inside of her Smithsonian office, where she works on antiquities and whatnot. This is the Dreamstone that can grant any wish that is, touched upon, but with a price. And so, in this movie, we have Diana Prince wishing for Steve Trevor to come back. We have Barbara, who wishes she could be as beautiful and as elegant and as strong as Diana. And we have the film's villain, Maxwell Lord, played by Pedro Pascal, wanting to be the number one person in the world. And I gotta say this movie does not hold up well after you watch it. As every time I go on the internet goes, after a movie comes out, there's always some online discourse about it, and Twitter was definitely a hot spot of it's either going to be a 10 out of 10 or it's going to be a 0 out of 10. And personally, to me, I was a little disappointed by the film after the fact. When I first watched the film on HBO Max, I actually kind of enjoyed it. But after you think about it, there's a lot of things that are really questionable about the movie. For starters, let's talk about how Steve Trevor returns. And just full warning here, this is going to be a spoiler-filled review. And if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want it spoiled for yourself, then skip to this timestamp here. If not, then feel free to stick around, because I'm going to be talking about this movie for a little bit. So let's get to one of the weirder things about this movie, and that is Steve Trevor's return. It's not as straightforward as I thought it was going to be. I thought Maxwell Lord had this ability to, manipulate people's, wishes and dreams, like it would be kind of interesting to do that. But no, instead, Diana wishes that she could have more time with Steve Trevor. But it doesn't happen the way you think it is. It's this person's body gets possessed by the spirit of Steve Trevor for some reason. And to everyone else, it's this guy from Hallmark being possessed by Chris Pine, and only Wonder Woman could see that this is Steve Trevor. Everyone else thinks it's just this random Hallmark guy being Steve Trevor, I guess. And it's weird because when you really think about it on its base level, wouldn't Wonder Woman essentially be assaulting this man? How do we even know who this guy is? Does this person have a family that he supports? Is he... I don't know. It just seems very wrong here. Just something very wrong. And I'm not sure why the writers of this film decided to say, hey, it would be a really fun idea if we transplant Steve Trevor's spirit because of the Dreamstone into the body of some random guy that no one knows about. And it's yeah, this is perfectly okay. It definitely doesn't speak to a lot of, sexual assault. And again, I'm not implying that the film is bad because of that. It's just questionable. There's a lot of questionable things about this film, and we'll get to one that is a little bit more questionable that I think kind of undercuts the film a little bit. But first, I want to get to some positives, because that was a weird thing that I didn't like, but let's get to some positives here. I think the acting, overall, pretty decent. There's some cheesy, hammy performances here from Pedro Pascal. He's having the time of his goddamn life in this movie, and for good reason. I think his character, Maxwell Lord, is actually a decently fleshed out character until the very end of the movie, but we'll get to that. I think his character is probably one of the better DCEU villains, because he actually has a backstory that people can care about. Like, his son wants him to be there. His son is trying to say, hey, Dad, I want some attention from you, and you're always working. You know, it's kind of like taking the whole, like, 90s workaholic dad archetype from things like Liar Liar or the Santa Claus movie and twisted it on its head to become, hey, this guy is actually kind of a bad guy and actually the villain of the movie. And it's with the power that he gets from the Dreamstone that he's able to grant people's wishes, but he himself can take things from the other person. So with that, he slowly but surely gains more and more power and notoriety in the world, causing a lot of chaos. And apparently he's just oblivious to the fact that this whole thing he's been doing is leading up to this huge climactic scene towards the end, and I'm not going to get into that just yet. And then for Barbara, she, again, as I said in the intro, she wants to be as strong as Diana. So she exhibits superhuman abilities, and she actually loses a bit of her, like, you know, glow, her just warmth of a person in the process. She becomes kind of an asshole to everyone. Like, they actually set up scenes in the beginning where she's like, yeah, I'm going to feed this homeless guy, and I'm going to do this stuff. Even though, yes, she does get, you know, objectified on the street, you know, it's still, you know, kind of bad. It does showcase what sometimes women do go through in even our time in 2020. But the one thing that kind of undercuts this entire movie is the film's pacing. This is the worst pacing I've seen out of a superhero movie all year. Mostly because of the fact that there's not enough that's going on in a lot of the scenes that it feels like there's a lot of padding. It really works well in the first 20 minutes because the first 20 minutes really get you into that mindset that this is like a Richard Donner type of movie with the whole scene in the mall and the fight in the mall. Like that whole thing, especially with like the kid being like thrown across the floor and into a pile of teddy bears, like that's like classic Richard Donner Superman stuff, and I'm like, that's kind of cool. I like that. But I think the problem that comes after that is that there's not a lot of action scenes after that point. It goes for a more emotional journey for these characters, and I find that okay. But then you start to think about some of the other stuff that's happening in this film, and all this film is that it's a MacGuffin chase, which is fine, but there's not a lot of, like, actual chasing going on until, like, the last 45 minutes. This is a 2.5 hour movie, and it's paced really poorly. There have been 2.5 hour movies that I've been able to sit through just fine. Like, Avengers Infinity War has if you were to compare it to that, it has a general pace, and each scene leads into the next, and the next, and the next, with not a lot of padding and not a lot of filler. This movie has, at points, some padding that really contributes to the whole thing just kind of slowing down a lot. And so, as the film goes on, you know, Maxwell Lord keeps getting all this power. He's granting all these wishes and taking power away from people and all this other stuff, and he's slowly but surely gaining all this power. And Wonder Woman finds out about this, you know, the MacGuffin from, you know, random exposition guy that we only see in one scene, and then goes off and tries to find the MacGuffin and finds out that the MacGuffin itself is now part of, you know, Maxwell Lord. So it's either you have to destroy him, essentially, or you have to convince the entire world to renounce their wish. And let's talk about that whole renouncing wish thing. There's this whole thing at the beginning of the movie where they have this Themyscira, like, Olympic Iron Man triathlon sort of thing, which is pretty cool, admittedly. It's a nice little opening scene. It gets you into the action quick. And they set up in that scene that Diana cheated to try to win. She found a shortcut along the path and tried to take it, and she lost because she cheated. And so it sets up this idea that, you know, you shouldn't cheat in life to get ahead in life. But that theme doesn't necessarily come back into the movie whatsoever. So it's kind of an odd sort of framing device that's just left there and being like, oh, look, here's the theme of the movie that we'll never talk about again. And I thought it was going to come back in the finale of the movie too, but it didn't. In fact, the finale of the movie is a little bit different. Now, I will commend Patty Jenkins on this, because one of the things I didn't like about the first movie was the fact that the Ares fight was actually a thing. Because what would have challenged Diana as a character is actually questioning her beliefs. Would the gods that, she was told about as a kid just not be real? Right? Like, I know this is DC Comics and, Ares is an actual character, but it would have been much more interesting and have an actual, like, conflict within the personality of Diana to be like, oh shit, my people lied to me for so long. It's not Ares himself that, creates war. It's a bunch of assholes in suits and ties and money people that help perpetuate war. Like, that would have been a more, like, modern day interpretation of what Wonder Woman is, without having to go into the mythological stuff. And I'm glad that this time around, there is a little bit of that mythological stuff in the fact that the Dreamstone is created by one of the gods who's like a trickster. What I like specifically about this final confrontation with Maxwell Lord is the idea that it's not about brawn. Because obviously he has so much magic ability at this point that he would be able to repel, Wonder Woman. And so she uses the lasso of truth. Now, it establishes earlier in the movie that the lasso of truth can also show people the truth as well as compel people to tell the truth. And what Wonder Woman invariably shows Maxwell Lord is the damage that he has done, essentially, and what he's about to lose if he doesn't, renounce his wish. If everyone doesn't renounce their wish, like, the world is going to come to an end. Like, just there. But what I also find disturbing about this scene is that the thing that is making Maxwell Lord getting all these wishes at the end is this satellite program that brainwashes, like, people in other countries. That, like, hacks into the system in other countries to, like, take over the televisions. And so, invariably, Wonder Woman is using mind control to tell people to renounce their wish in order to stop Armageddon and have faith in Wonder Woman. Which kind of causes a little bit of trouble from the first movie. Because the first movie establishes this whole notion that Wonder Woman, while being a god, doesn't want to rule over humanity. She sees humanity in a much different light. She sees humanity as, flawed, but can be guided, but not ruled over, like Ares would want to, right? And so, what this invariably does in Wonder Woman 1984 is kind of make Wonder Woman into a complete jerk a little bit. Like, she doesn't outright say that she wants to, have people put faith in her. Not necessarily, but the way it's positioned, it's just kind of weird, right? And it's also weird that everyone would be compelled to, like, renounce their wish, like, and the whole thing with renouncing the wish doesn't really make sense either. Like, apparently, like, people have this memory of making the wish, but the wish didn't come true because the things disappeared, and I have no idea what the hell was going on with any of this. Hey guys, future editor Nick here. I wanted to talk about my thoughts on the Cheetah fight scene in this movie and how I hate the hell out of it. There had to have been some sort of meeting in the Warner Brothers room that said, oh, okay, well, we need to have some sort of fight scene before the Pedro Pascal confrontation so that it comes off as, oh, look, we actually did the fight thing that is part of comic book sort of movies. And so what happens invariably is that you have to have a CGI cheetah, which looks like garbage, and then they have to darken the skies and make it look so dark that you can barely see any details or anything about Cheetah herself, which makes the fight look so amateur. And honestly, it's very sad because you could have done a better job with the CG. Maybe it was rushed, maybe it wasn't, but I don't necessarily know. Maybe Cheetah was just thrown in at the last second. I just don't exactly know why the fight scene itself needed to be so dark and so, well, can't really see anything in the dark, so you can't really see anything of the details. Maybe they were afraid of the fact that maybe the Cheetah model itself is not necessarily great either. So, yeah, there's my thoughts on that. And then they have this whole thing with, like, Maxwell Lord being an oil baron, and that's, that's political commentary, I guess, to have the villain of the story be an oil baron, considering the fact that America has had a long history with oil, but they don't do anything with it. There's nothing that really points into any specific direction of criticism or critique of the culture of the 80s, which is kind of where a lot of our problems started in the Middle East, and they don't do much with it. And I think that's kind of weird, It is weird that a film that, goes on and says, hey, we all have our problems and we all have our, moments when we feel downtrodden, but you just gotta forget about it and let go of the things that make you mad. But, like, then you have things like institutionalized racism and sexism and homophobia and xenophobia and transphobia and all this other stuff. And it's like, okay, Wonder Woman, but, like, these systems that are in place are the things that are perpetuating the things. So you're telling people to renounce the wish that makes their life better and telling people to forget about the ways that society has victimized them. What? I just don't get it. I don't get why she would say that. I honestly don't get it. Like, I understand, maybe from like a neoliberal's perspective, is just like, hey, like, everything's a construct and all that stuff, and I agree. I agree a lot of stuff that we put in society is a construct, but there's no point in telling people that we need to get over all the things that make us sad when there's things, even in Maxwell Lord's own, like, flashbacks, he's downtrodden because he was poor. It's established in that scene that because of the way that he was brought up, he wanted to be the best. But because of his arrogance in trying to become the best, he's led other people astray, and especially, had frayed relationships with his own son. And it could have had a better, like, message in that, It honestly could have. In the end, Wonder Woman 1984 is a mess when you start to really think about this movie in a lot of different ways. It's also messy from a technical perspective. It's not as messy as Suicide Squad with its terrible editing. I think it's just bogged down by poor pacing for a lot of it. And I do think that Wonder Woman 1984 is recommendable to people who don't care about logic in their movies, but in the end, Wonder Woman 1984 is not a perfect movie that I thought it was. I was kind of disappointed after a couple days of thinking about it. And to be honest, this does have some good stuff. This does have some good ideas for conflicts and some good ideas thematically, but at the same time, it's muddled by a bunch of inconsistent, politics. It's bogged down by inconsistencies between movies. And there's so many things that I just, like, can't really wrap my head around. And it's also paced very poorly. Also, the Linda Carter cameo was kind of, like, ham-fisted. Like, the way that Linda Carter was, like, told to smile at the camera and look at the audience and say, I've been doing this a long time. And I'm like, no, I don't like that. It just felt forced. But I like the fact that Linda Carter actually had kind of a role in this movie as the first Amazonian, or, like, one of the bravest Amazonians to, like, wear the golden armor. I guess that's kind of cool, right? So in the end, I'm going to give Wonder Woman 1984 a C-. And the next film up is We Can Be Heroes, the next film by Robert Rodriguez, in the same vein as Sharkboy and Lava Girl and the Spy Kids movies. Taking place in the world of the Heroics, we follow the kids of a group of people called the Heroics, and one day an alien invasion happens that kidnaps all of these kids' parents, and so the kids break out and try to find some way to get their parents back and to save the world. This movie is weird to me, because I grew up watching Spy Kids and Sharkboy and Lava Girl, and Sharkboy and Lava Girl is not a good movie at all. but it is a childhood classic to a lot of my generation. And so, to start things off with, let's talk about Sharkboy and Lava Girl, okay? Lava Girl, I think, is played by the same actress. But Sharkboy is played by some other person other than Taylor Lautner. I have no idea how they could not have gotten, like, Taylor Lautner back for this movie, but, like, blows my mind a little bit. What I can kindly say about this movie is that it feels like something that Robert Rodriguez would do if he was to do a Secret Invasion meets Young Avengers type movie, you know? Like, it's a group of kids who have various different powers, and some of them are kind of dumb. But they actually find creative ways to do, some of the other stuff too. I think the kids' powers are pretty dynamic for the most part. We have, twins that can move forward and backwards in times by only about a minute, which is kind of cool. It makes for some creative, like, situations of having to change time and dilate time and make things go faster, make things go slower and whatnot. I think that's pretty cool. Then obviously you have, like, a kid that's, like, Mr. Fantastic with, like, all the stretchy limbs and whatnot. There's actually a kid in a wheelchair in this movie that the explanation as to why he's in the wheelchair is that his legs are so, like, strong that he would break if he walked or something like that. And that's why he's in the wheelchair, and the wheelchair has, like, gadgets and stuff. Okay, I find that's kind of cool. And then you have, like, a kid who can't really control his powers because he can't focus. So that's immediately, like, a whole thing about ADHD. It's like, oh, okay, cool. I can relate to that a little bit. And then you have, like, a kid who can, like, predict the future, on, like, an iPad. But the one kid that doesn't really have powers is the daughter of Pedro Pascal's character. Kind of funny that 2 movies in a row I'm reviewing in this movie review thing. Both the movies have Pedro Pascal in it. But anyway, she's the daughter of Pedro Pascal's character who has, like, swords and magnet hands, I guess. And, he leads by example. And her power in the end is leading by example, which is kind of cool. There's other characters I've failed to talk about in this review because a lot of them are kind of like, okay, sure, that's fine. This movie is kind of unabashedly just corny. And I like that. It's just very unabashedly corny. And that's the charm of, like, Robert Rodriguez's family films compared to other family films, is that he's able to capture the, quote, family dynamic within his own sort of way. In his family films, he usually has, like, a very, most of them anyway, have a very close-knit relationship, he understands the power and bond of family. Especially in the Spy Kids movies. And in this movie, there's a lot of dysfunction, and he transforms the meaning of family to being the family of, this superhero team that they're a part of, and he does a pretty decent job. There's some really corny stuff, especially with, like, Guppy going, like, full, like, angry shark, and this Guppy, like, puts on, like, glasses and goes, "Rah!" And it's, like, it's funny, it's goofy, it's everything. But we gotta talk about the aliens, because the aliens just kind of don't make sense. Okay, so it goes pretty much what you would think would happen in an alien invasion type of movie. Like, they kidnap the superheroes and all that stuff. And you find out that the leader... spoilers ahead, by the way. You find out that the leader, or the person that works at the Heroics, is secretly an alien. And they're trying to destroy all the, superheroes. Destroy all the superheroes. But then, once we get to the finale of the thing, there's this weird rug pull that happens, where the rug pull is this whole thing of, oh yeah, we weren't actually trying to kill you. We weren't actually trying to destroy you. We were actually preparing you to try to take control and be the future. And you know what? To be honest, even though this rug pull comes out of nowhere, it has a decent theme, I guess, because, the younger kids are the next generation. We tell that to every generation that comes out, but it truly does feel like we do need heroes in the future. When we have things such as climate change and political corruption, and we have all this other stuff, I think Robert Rodriguez wanted to make a film that empowers the younger kids to get involved and be brave and fight for what they believe in, and I think that's what he was trying to do. I think. Or it could just be a dumb movie. Either way, it works for me. But yeah, there's some nonsensical story beats in this movie. There's some dumb sound effects here and there. Some of the CG doesn't quite work, but it is a better improvement over things like Sharkboy and Lava Girl, where the CG was noticeably bad. But in this one, it's kind of cheesy bad as well. But yeah, I found this movie to be kind of funny at times. And it's, at times it's heartwarming, but it's the kind of dumb movie that you would expect to find at like a midnight showing in like a film festival somewhere. Like it's a fun little film that people might enjoy. It's not great. It's definitely not going to be on my top 10 list, but it's pretty fine. And I'm going to give We Can Be Heroes a B-. Thank you guys so much for watching the first of 2 double feature reviews. I'll be back in about a day or so with Soul and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.